I've been asked to speak for a little while on envisaging a whole world. And I'd like to take us back a step because my sense is that our worldview, whatever it is what drives our behaviours. What we think about ourselves, what we believe about ourselves, what we think and believe about the world, then essentially drives how we behave in the world. And ancient peoples had an understanding of the whole world. It may have not had the sophistication of ours. In many ways it had a deeper, profound truth than ours. But it always aimed to understand the entirety of reality, the entirety of the cosmos, the entirety of experience. And whether that was turtles all the way down, or whatever it was, or in the most profound understanding perhaps of the ancient Indian traditions, of the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, which essentially describe the world as the one Buddhist symbol does, as an entirety. Nothing is outside that circle. Everything is within it. Everything literally is a whole world, not just in the physical sense, but in multidimensional senses. And of course, in ancient times, it was natural to experience the physical world and other realms of experience as a oneness. People moved between worlds with ease. The veils were less rigid, and therefore there was the ability to not just envisage a whole world, but to embody a whole world within human experience, a whole world that encompassed not just humanity, but the whole of Gaia, the whole of Mother Earth and all her children, and the entire cosmos. But something happened to us collectively a few hundred years ago. And I think this happens always as we go through progressive evolutionary exploration. And that is that a time came when the religion of the day, the primary religion of the day in the West, the Christian church, had become so dogmatic that that anything that disagreed with its perspective was deemed as heresy. So at that point, at that crossroads point, science began to emerge. Pioneering scientists and philosophers began to say, well, actually, we don't want to be heretics. We don't particularly want to have house imprisonment for the rest of our lives. We don't really want to be burnt at the stake, thank you very much. So what we're going to do is we're going to start to bring apart what is spiritual, what is the realm of religion, and what is the realm of physical exploration of the world. And so this crossroads began to separate us with all good intention, began to separate ourselves of who we are into some form of spiritual experience, which became faith-based, which was faith-based in that terminology, and an evidence-based perspective. And that journey has taken us to the place we are at now, because what's happened in that journey is that the scientific perspective, which has been about evidence, which has been about replicability, began something that of its own sense became dogmatic. It was only willing to acknowledge a physical realm. It was only willing to explore that. And in so exploring it, it devised some wonderful techniques for finding out more about the physical world. And one of those was to take stuff apart. Take it apart. So if we have my pencil case, Exhibit A, take it apart into its threads, take those apart into their molecules, take those apart into their atoms, down, down, down. It's called reductionism, and it's an incredibly powerful scientific way of exploring the physical world. But as Deepak Chopra said, it's a bit like taking a radio apart and then wondering what happened to the music. Because when we take something apart, we lose something too. Because what science now, the new emerging science, is realizing is that that is a powerful tool, but it is a powerful tool. It is not the total way of understanding, not just the physical world, but in the totality of reality, it doesn't even begin to approach the richness and the depth of both simplicity and complexity that plays out through all the different realms of experience. So what science is now coming to is its own crossroads. We almost got there 100 years ago. 19th century science was very mechanistic. It was very much the clockwork cosmos or universe. But at that time, we didn't even know that there was anything beyond our own galaxy. Can you figure that out? 100 years ago or less, all the hundreds of millions of galaxies in our universe weren't even understood or known about. Just our own Milky Way galaxy was the total of cosmologists' perspective. We've come a huge way in 100 years to the Hubble telescope, to those incredible, exquisite views of the wider cosmos. But when, 100 years ago, there was a revolution in science, and the quantum theory came forward, and my beloved Albert, bless his cotton socks, Dr. Einstein, as he's more formally known, discovered. And it was a discovery. It was a discovery that also space and time are not absolute but relative. That was a revolution. And it was a revolution that could have, at that point, reconciled science with spirit again. Because the quantum physicists were also finding that you couldn't separate an observer and what was observed. And that when you look at something, it does essentially come into reality. That should have raised a couple of thoughts, and it did. But those pioneering philosophical considerations that really could have brought everything back together again were sort of peripheralized. And so the 20th century science is an unfinished revolution. It's an incomplete revolution. And the elephant in the room that it refused to acknowledge was consciousness. And now, 100 years on, with all the technological advances that 20th century science has brought us, we're at another crossroads. Back at the end of the 19th century, something as simple as trying to understand how the heat from a hot oven radiated, literally, something ostensibly as simple as that, which could not be understood by the science then, led to the birth of the quantum revolution. Now, again, we've got anomalies in our experiences. People are experiencing synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that no mainstream scientific paradigm has a hope of answering. Science is discovering experimentally that we are non-locally interconnected beyond the limitations of space and time. Experiments are showing irrefutably that our consciousness has a fundamental role to play in the creation of what we call reality. Cosmologists are realizing that we cannot understand the physical realm without recourse to a deeper causative realm of, consciousness. Across massive realms, massive breadth of research from meteorology and geology and biology, lots of ologies, to cosmology, science is coming forward with an understanding that the world is patterned, that all that we call reality is co-created of patterning, fractals, of energy that go from the tiniest scale to the whole of the universe. And even more fundamentally, they're realizing that even more profound, at the deeper roots of space and time and energy and matter, is information. We cannot understand the universe without a multidimensional perspective, and a multidimensional perspective that is informational. And information's a slippery slope. If we start down the slippery slope of an informational universe, guess what? We're going to come to a conscious universe, a conscious cosmos. We're going to come to God. We're going to come to Allah. We're going to come to the oneness of all that is. We're going to come to spirit. And so we're going to inevitably, through this crossroads and this moving forward, reconcile that divergent path. We're going to reconverge into a perspective, a worldview of literally a whole world. And when that worldview, when that whole worldview, which is being birthed primarily through younger scientists who don't have the perspectives of peers such as the older generation have. Thomas Kuhn, who wrote about paradigm change, was asked once how it progressed, and he said, by funerals. Hopefully not, but his point is that younger people are more open to the possibilities, and that goes for younger scientists, as it goes for younger bankers, as it goes for younger politicians, as it goes for younger... That we have a generation coming through, and some are here today, and some of us are more elders, and we want to nurture this, to which a whole world perspective is natural, is easily assimilated, is taken into the heart as well as the mind, as well as into the purpose of how we live. And we are on the cusp of this. There is a tide in the events of men that is flowing fast at the moment, and it's taking us to that remembering of a whole world. Not remembering. We've dismembered our psyche through this exploration of a reductionist perspective that isn't just scientific, because the scientific perspective has become our societal perspective in the main. So when this moves forward, it's a worldview that's far too important to keep to the scientists. Because this whole worldview is one that we can literally, as society, as humanity, embrace. It transcends the illusory separation between faith-based and evidence-based. It just becomes experientially based. And we can come to that whole world. We have dismembered our psyche to some degree in the way we've moved over the last few hundred years with this reductionist approach, which talks of a meaningless world and a fragmented world. This remembers our psyche into a meaningful cosmos, where we are both creation and co-creators, where we remember that we are that spark of the divine. It is our innate reality. It is that remembering. And that remembering is also a resolution. It is an integration. How many more words can I play with in one sentence? And it brings all of us, that integration brings all that we are together. Because one of the things that has been peripheralized in our dismembered exploration, which has been fun while it lasted, is the divine feminine within each and every one of us, regardless of the gender that we were incarnated into. As the ancient Indian traditions understood, energetically, consciously, we comprise of three universal aspects of the way in which consciousness explores itself. The divine masculine, the divine feminine, the divine child. They are all energized within us. But on a societal basis, we have peripheralized the divine feminine, the attributes of the heart, the attributes of compassion, as Dr. Abadi spoke of inclusion. These are part of our remembering. This reintegration, this balancing, this wholeness is part of our reintegration. So when we envisage the whole world, this is our time to do this. This is the moment to do this. And this is not something for the future, although it is. The wonderful specifics that an inspirational way forward that Dr. Abadi and Reverend Lee spoke of is for us to envisage now, to walk towards, just as Martin Luther King did, just as Gandhi did, just as all the great leaders have done. But in this case, we can envisage the whole world now within each of us. We can embody it now. We don't have to wait for anyone else. We can do it now. And that is what I invite each and every one of us to do, and walk together towards that, remembering that oneness that is who we really are. So thank you.
Thank you.